Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast. I'm your host, Jawad Mir. Thank you so much for joining. Today, my guest is Vikash. He's a cinematographer who has done a lot of work in the advertisement and documentary space. And he was the DP on the film Lost, aka Laapataa Ladies, which premiered on Netflix a few months ago. If you remember, I spoke to the editor of the film, Jableen Merchant, back then. And today I have Vikash, who talks about his journey in the filmmaking world, as well as working on Laapataa Ladies, Lost Ladies, which is one of my favorite films to come out in a while. You can watch it on Netflix. A very powerful, very meaningful, very entertaining film. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Vikas for Laapataa Ladies, aka Lost Ladies. Well, good to have you. I remember speaking to Jableen about a few months ago when the film came out. I think it was probably in September, October it came out. It's been a
Yeah,
while.
right.
And yeah, it was a great conversation, and I absolutely loved Lapata Ladies, aka Lost Ladies. And now it's in the sort of preliminary round of running for the Oscars, well, which is pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't think it got nominated, but yeah,
But it
yeah.
hasn't, the nominations haven't been announced yet.
Yeah, as far as I know, it was an entry from India,
Uh-huh.
but it wasn't
Ah,
selected as
okay.
far as yeah.
That sucks. Nevertheless.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Nevertheless, it was an incredible piece of film. I think after Lagan, I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Yeah.
The one that came
Yeah.
out almost 25 years ago. It's one of the best movies that have come out from India, along with maybe 12th Fail that came out last year, I think.
Yeah. No,
Um,
appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We should chat with Kiran. I mean, she's actually, are you in LA currently or
I'm in Toronto.
Toronto? Okay.
I was going to go to LA. I know a lot of people who have lost their homes in the fires.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, crazy.
I was
Yeah.
actually gonna go this week or next week. So I've been trying to. It's funny, Jableen gave me Karen's contact. I've emailed her several times, but I know she's super busy. So I gotta give it a shot, give her a shot again. Maybe she'll have some time.
Yeah, yeah. This is actually my first interview. Actually, I've never really spoken about any films I've ever done before, or my craft, or anything like that. Or so yeah, this
Well,
is the
that's an
first for me. But Kiran
I
Kiran does a lot of it. She's
yeah, yeah.
been out lobbying for the film, and I mean, there's a lot,
Yes.
for her to really. It's really there's a lot for her to say about it. I think this film was really a director's film. As a cinematographer, I mean, it's great to chat, but I mean, it's
I
it's
think you're being
it's
humble.
very no, 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 for real. So I'll tell you a bit about it, but yeah, 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 yeah.
Well,
But
let's
I'll
let's
let I'll
let's
let you I'll let you shoot.
let's
Yeah.
let's do this first. Let's start from it's an amazing that to have you on. Let's start with your career first, how it started and what sparked it, what got you into what you do.
Yeah, it's a bit of a it was a bit of a long journey actually.
I'm
I
sure.
never imagined that I would be actually doing film. I studied philosophy in university, actually, like Buddhism and environmental economics, and was living out in Tasmania at the time. Didn't really grow up with, you know, too much film. I was in boarding school. We never really had TV or even really the opportunity to actually watch too many films. I moved to India in '97, really to continue my environmental work, because I felt that was what was important at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I used to run a company, really doing, eco adventure camps for kids, so taking city kids out into nature, on camps, trying to educate them, about the environment and putting them, firsthand in real environments in nature and, trekking and hiking and rock climbing and whatnot. And it was only one day in the kids' school year, you know. And at that time, in India, we didn't really have environmental education as part of the curriculum in schools. I was just a 21-year-old kid at the time and just rocking up to school principals and being like, hey, can I take 50 of your kids out into the jungle on overnight camps and whatnot. And some of them were very cool, very liberal. They gave me the opportunity to do that. Um, but it just was it was already a stretch to just have one day in the school year, where they could actually have a break day for the kids to kind of get out. Nothing really consistent to kind of follow that up in schools. And multimedia had just come out at the time. And I was like, hey, what if I make multimedia CD-ROMs with educational material? Would you use that in your school programs? And I was running this out of Bangalore at the time. And, a lot of the principals were very cool, very liberal, and very open, I must say. And they were like, yeah, sure, we'd give it a go, not even knowing, what I was going to come back with, So I then moved to Bombay and decided to try and study multimedia. This was in XIC. And I hadn't lived in India since I was about 12 years old. So I wasn't so connected to Bombay or the space. I grew up between Thailand and Australia and didn't really know anyone when I came to Bombay. But I just so happened to run into, a junior of mine in high school from Bangkok who had also moved to Bombay. And I needed a job. And, he knew someone who knew someone. There was a job going in a production house. Um, and they did advertising, And for me at that time, it was like, wow, this is diametrically opposite to what I'm trying to do, but maybe this is the way in, try and kind of work change from the inside. So I switched my major from multimedia to visual effects, studied a bit of animation, compositing, and jumped into a production house in the early days in Bombay, where there were very few production houses. There wasn't really a very established system. So as you came in as an assistant, you pretty much did everything. You were, if there was a problem in continuity and the actors forgot his glasses on a tape, it was your fault. If there was a glitch on the master tape, it was your fault. You know, you'd get into everything from pre-production, styling, um, you know, working on art, compositing stuff, sometimes shooting second camera, casting, you name it. It wasn't a very structured system. But what was amazing was you could just get in and really learn everything. So, I kind of put my head down and said, okay, I'm just gonna immerse myself into this and try and learn. And for me, it wasn't so much um, the love for film that brought me into the film business, but it was actually understanding the power of the medium to be able to communicate that then brought me into the industry. Um, so it was like, okay, this is a great medium to be able to communicate, to be able to touch people, to connect with people. This is something that's coming into their homes, on this television, you have access to so many people. So that journey really then started with me as a assistant director, in a production house in about 97, 98 in Bombay. And thereafter, I directed with MTV for a couple of years, because at that point it was pretty much the one space where, you were given a lot of creative freedom, you know. And in India, it was a really cool space in the late 90s, of where MTV was at, and a lot of the music channels that allowed expression and allowed you to say stuff. And in fact, they hired me to do short films, and really kind of one of the only things I watched, kind of growing up and through university was the show in Australia on SBS called Eat Carpet, which was just a
Mm.
bunch of really whacked out short films. And I was like, wow, this is a way to, have interesting ideas, reach potentially the same kind of market, um, and do interesting work that's also creative. Um, I went down that path for a couple of years, and then in the early 2000s, MTV wanted to change their whole programming to be more Bollywood centric, you know. um, that wasn't, my universe that I was familiar with, and I couldn't direct that stuff. And I was like, listen, you know, I can't work here as a director, but I can shoot it because I've been, shooting since, the early days when I started off, and through my time at MTV and so on. And it so happened my father had passed away the same year. He left me some money, so I took that. I moved to New York, studied camera, worked in short films, worked the independent scene for a little while, and then returned to India to then pursue cinematography. So simultaneously, I had a production house where I did small little independent projects that I really cared for, documentaries and so on that I would direct. And commercially, I would hone my craft, working advertising, music videos at the time, and really thereafter a couple of films. I don't do too many movies. I try and just find things that really kind of align with me, and sometimes it takes a decade to find the right project. So maybe just, maybe average a film a decade or something like that, you know. Um, and yeah, doing the odd documentary and otherwise just kind of honing my craft, really with advertising all these years. So it's been, yeah, close to 30 years now in this industry, largely advertising and yeah, the occasional film. But really, I think even now, especially even after Laapataa, I'm really excited about doing more movies. Really, kind of, especially when you do a film that touches people, and you really feel like, wow, it's really resonated with people on a much deeper level. It's really motivating, to then do more of that. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing such detailed story because it means a lot because everybody has their own journey and we live it's funny because growing up similarly with like you in the 90s, back then all you can think of is being a director or cinematographer or whatever in that realm. And there was, at the time that advertising and corporate stuff and all the other fun stuff was there, but it wasn't that common. And now in the last 15, 20 years, people do a lot of those, but now that's shifting too, right? And I think it's amazing that your journey has been like that. And in terms of you being an environmentalist, for the lack of a better word, being trying to be in it when you were before you even got this into career, I haven't had a chance to look up if you have done anything in terms of a documentary because I mean documentaries are such social and powerful, medium that you can literally have a massive impact. Have you done anything to that effect, or are you working on something that's more environmental based?
yeah. I mean, in India, it was always a bit, to find the avenue to do documentaries was a very kind of narrow window. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
what I've done has been like for Save the Children. I did a couple of projects for the BBC, Planet
Mm.
Earth, the Earth changed, both during the lockdown, which were really fantastic projects. One was following a herd of wild elephants through Assam. The other one was really, on the Ficus elastica, the living root bridges in Meghalaya. So yeah, yeah, and then a bunch before that, some in the DRC.
Sweet.
Yeah, so like through my life, I mean, it's just been kind of spaced out. It's always this balance of doing commercial work and also finding, you know, the few projects on the other side that really kind of give you meaning.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat as you, man. So I
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
understand. Um, going to Laapata Ladies or Lost Ladies, how did that come to be? If you can run through that to me, and then, once you got on, then I'll come up with well, I'll let you know the next question, but let's just talk about that briefly.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, the director Kiran, I've kind of known her for several years.
Okay,
And she just called me one day, and she sent me the script, and she's like, "Have a read." And it was an incredible read. I kind of laughed out loud. It was just it was moving at the same time. It was funny. It was it had everything, and it was a real page turner. And I was like, this is amazing, but am I the right guy for this project? And I suddenly felt a little the thing is, I think I've kind of put myself into a corner where I'm really like kind of known for more stylistic advertising kind of work. And here was a project which was so far away from my familiar world, the world that I was kind of known for. There was a great fear that, you would enter something like this and contaminate it stylistically, you know. I felt it kind of needed to be, just really, I mean, it's when you get a script that you feel is um how do I say this? It's like, it holds its own, in terms of um it's almost beyond your craft. It's profound in itself. you know it it's terrifying, than saying, oh my God, am I just gonna like mess up something like this? Am I gonna taint it too much? Am I gonna draw attention to it, visually? And that was something I really wanted to stay away from. I said, this needs to just be very real, be very to let it just be, you know, um, to let it just kind of take shape itself, to not make you feel like, it's been doctored, you know, and give it that sense of, just making it, so you don't really impose yourself upon something, and you just kind of let it breathe for what it is. Because what it's saying is so deep and so profound and so on point and um, so meaningful and so I almost for me it was almost like it's something it's so pure in itself. You're like, oh my God, I'm gonna I'm going to dilute that purity if I try and touch it. You know. So I really came from that space. And initially, my response to Karen was like, I don't know if I'm the right guy for this, because it's so far away from my visual universe. Um, I don't want it to feel like, some city guy who's gone into a village and kind of done that outside look upon it. It's the worst thing that could potentially happen to it. You don't want an outside gaze on it. So maybe I'm not the right person for it, and I hung up and 20 minutes later she called me back and and she was like, oh, I'd like you to consider it again, and she's like, we're friends and I'm like, at some point it was like, okay, if I can support someone who wants to say this, just in whichever way I can, um, that maybe that's what I should do here. And then that was really, yeah, the beginning of that, and then just deep dived in, and then it was just like, okay, now we're in it. Let's just, yeah, let's get it.
It is such a bold, but it makes sense for her to choose someone like you, A, you being a friend, but B, you being in the opposite world, right? It's like similar to acting. A lot of great directors, they get actors that don't have they're not typecasted, that haven't done anything similar to this before, because even though they might say it's not possible, I haven't done it, it just brings a new challenge to them, and it brings out the best. And I think a similar thing is with you, because you being in advertising, it's a completely contrast world, right? You're
Yeah,
looking about it like a village, a train station, and all that stuff. And I wouldn't even have imagined that you had a background that you explained right now, considering what you did, because it's an absolutely it's the right word is not that it's not what I'm not trying to say that it's the most beautiful film shot, but it is the one of the most beautiful films shot because it didn't overpower the story and the characters. And that's what's so amazing about it. And I find, and I think you know this too, and I being in the industry, I know this too. I notice it like, when you're watching a film, whether it's in Hollywood, South Korean, Australian, British, India, whatever, when you start seeing a little bit of camera gimmick or visual effects gimmick, subconsciously or consciously, it is an attempt to hide the weakness in the story and the characters.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
what was so
yeah, yeah.
riveting about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, some films have that, need that language, right? To kind of be
I
visceral
get
and
that.
all of that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but
sometimes
yeah,
even in
exactly.
that they get too much, right? So you just have to find the fine line.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we're always, serving the story, right? As
Yeah,
cinematographers, we're like, okay,
100%.
what does the story need? Where do we place this? Where do we place it emotionally? Where do we, how do we taint it? How do we color it? How do we lens it? Like what's our language? What's our participation in this project? What is our role here? You know? And for me, I think it was very clear that, you see a lot of stuff that especially, when a lot of the urban folk like look at village life, there's always either romanticized view, or we just kind of go super arty and stylized on it, and um really kind of put on another layer that might not be what it
Mm.
genuinely is, but we kind of impose that upon it, or we just go super gritty and grungy and dirty on it, and
Like Gangs of Azirapur.
yeah, I mean, I mean, look, I mean, you know, everyone's got a different language and everyone's got different
Yeah,
things to
yeah,
say,
yeah.
and a lot of this tone on in the film was, and I always kind of, for me, the tone always really comes from the way the protagonist looks at the world, you know. Um, it was like, what is his, how would he see the world around him? What is that texture? What are those tones? That for me dictates, lens choices, color, how shadows kind of roll off, and how contrasty an image is. It's just the way, the characters see the world. And here our primary characters, all three of them. Um, and there was a certain innocence there. There was a certain, um, you know, it was like the edges were softened, you know. Um, and I think that was something with Kiran, the director's tone as well, like he wanted this lightness to it. Um, and that for me really dictated the visual style, and it was like, okay, I can't let's not, draw attention to an image, you know, let the story really kind of, and you want that, you want it to kind of, every time no matter what you work on, you want it to feel like a real experience for the audience, sometimes when you draw attention to a camera move, or you draw attention to light, it's like having a bad performance, where you see the acting, or you see a boom in shot. It's the same thing. You're not composing a shot with the makeup artist standing in frame. It's the same thing, right? You
Yeah.
don't want to draw attention to your craft. You want to keep it invisible. Um, and in this world, I just kind of wanted to feel as objective as possible, kind of being there, observing, um, but not really forcing a viewpoint,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think you said it perfectly well that there was no enforcement. And when I talked about Gangs of Wazirpur, I wasn't criticizing. It's one of my favorite films. I was just talking about the look and the feel. It's because every story requires, because it's a different type of a story, right? And with this
Yes.
film, had the script been a little bit more, like kind of like a little extra sentimental, for the lack of a better word, over dramatic,
Yeah.
then certainly the look would have been different. but it was just done in such a tasteful way because it wasn't you didn't feel, you know, overly sympathize for the characters and the level where you feel sorry for them, but you felt sympathized for them, but at the same time, you know, you wanted something good for them, but you understood that they have bad traits as well, which was again, it goes back to the script, goes back to the story, goes back to the character. Working with Kiran, I know you've known her for a while. Was it the first time you were working with her professionally?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
What is she like a director?
I mean, she's incredibly she's one of the hardest working kind of people I've met. You know, she's really and she really gets into details. You know, she's really in it. And she puts everything into it, you know. So it really um it makes you really want to step up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you propose something, I know she's probably thought about it 5 times already. You know, she really gets in there, you know, in terms of real kind of micro detail and puts every kind of ounce of energy into her work and what she's doing. It was really inspiring, you know, to kind of work with her. She's really like just on it, you know, like 100%. Um, and yeah, you know, it's sometimes you feel like, okay, you know, I like really working with directors who are super organized because then I feel like, okay, then I can take the ball and run, you know. Um, you know, as a DP, a lot of times you kind of find yourself in a situation where you're just trying to like, you know, hold it together, you know, if it's kind of scattered with production and so on. You're just trying to like,
Yeah.
you know, just bring it in and just make sure all the things kind of work. But every time I work with a director, and I think I do best with directors who are like really, you know, meticulous and organized, it really, you know, allows you to then be spontaneous on the day because you know, the bases have been covered, you know, and you know, you're fine here, you know, you're sorted here. Now you can kind of start pushing things and, you know, beyond that. So it was a great collaboration. It was absolutely fantastic working with her. She's, you know, really kind of, you know, really knows what she wants. And at the same time is always open to conversation. And that's, you know, that's a fantastic combination to have.
Do you remember a particular, I know these things sometimes can become difficult to pull out from the memory lane, but do you remember a particular moment or scene that you shot where it kind of just stood out for whatever reason that was? Whether it was humorous, whether it was challenging, whether it was emotional.
Um, well, you know, I could talk about just things in terms of in terms of in terms of you know light, you know. Um, I was in one of the scenes in the station, um,
Mm,
and it was one of the first few days off the shoot. I actually had COVID. We did a test just before we had to leave for shoot, and I you know got the results that you know the shoot you know that I was COVID positive, and then I had to make the call and be like, we're supposed to leave tomorrow, and damn, you know. So I had my first AC who's worked with me for you know close to 20 years step in for me and shoot the first parts. And the first night I kind of came in, we're doing this night scene in the station, and it's a very restrictive space where we really had no allowance for any light coming in. It was a small little crack in in the wall, and it was the only space to kind of throw a light into, you know. And I remember reading this thing. It was this book I was reading on the elements of Japanese design, right? And it turned out to actually be a book on philosophy, really. You know, not so much on design. And it talked about, you know, sometimes if you really kind of restrict yourselves in your expression, but allow just one little window for you to express yourself. It could be like a kimono, but the only time you have an expression is, behind the left ankle, and that's your one streak. And I try to apply that to lighting as well, where, okay, you have conformity in the space, and then you allow one hard brush stroke to come in through this crack. And just the way it kind of played with the characters, kind of moving in and out of that light, um, it, it just felt it's really amazing when things like that happen, because you don't really plan for it, and then there's magic that just kind of happens, kind of brings you back to kind of just a general kind of a general kind of method where, I think I kind of go through waves of, really deep diving into, previs and prepping, and then sometimes just going, okay, I'm not going to watch anything, and I'm just going to react spontaneously to what's happening in front of me, and um it's been really interesting because, sometimes I feel like, um you know I mean, previs is great, and I admire directors, and I really love that, but it has its place, right? And I feel you previs all you want, but in a way, it kind of belongs to the past, because anything that you can pre-visualize is borrowed from things that have somehow made their way in, that have belonged to the past. And you might be assembling them, but it belongs to a river that's already passed by, right? And then when the only thing is the current moment that you're in, and that becomes the moment that's alive, where you leave previous behind, and you're just reacting to something that's happening now. And that's when it becomes a live moment, you know? And I feel like that authenticity is what then audiences can really touch and feel, to the sense of it being a live event, so I love things like that, you could, maybe you haven't planned, and things just kind of then just start dancing around that, and it's a live event that happens sometimes between optics, the camera, actors, and action, and it just becomes a live dance, and those are the moments that I really treasure.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. I mean, you whether you're doing well with doc, I mean, it's really difficult to do a previs because, you're it's organic. Everything is happening organically, no matter how much you plan.
Yeah,
But even with the narrative, things on the set, it could be the lighting, like you said, coming from behind a cracked wall. It could be an actor who brought something else to the character that you did not anticipate. And it just, again, it's called movie magic. And
yeah.
having a plan is amazing, right? Like you said. But I think opening yourself to improvisation is probably the best thing you can do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think with this film, it really was that. I mean, the actors had so much energy. They had so much drive. They were so keen. It was just like, okay, I'm just trying to, do as much justice as I can here to what's happening in front of me. I'm just like, I just hope I can do justice to you
Yeah,
guys, because you're bringing so much into this. So, you create the room for them to move, to play, and you're like, okay, I'm just trying to get this. Um,
yeah.
so then it kind of informs your choices on grips, so most of this film was just really just handheld. It just had, the camera just on a bungee at most, and just try to keep it as fluid as possible, touch it very little with light, just where it like needed a little something. Um, but otherwise just kind of keep it free for the actors, let it just play out, just see what the light is doing in the village, and how it's kind of rendering, and you do all your homework before, you try and get the colors right of the space, the wardrobe, there's a lot of thought and everything that went into that, especially with Kiran. um but then when it's actually happening, then you just try and be present, and just say, okay, I'm just going to let it happen. And it was great learning for me, because a lot of advertising is the other way around. You want it so kind of doctored, and you want it so, you're
Yeah,
working 4 hours for 2 seconds, you know? So it was great to have the freedom to just throw that out and
sweet.
say, yeah, okay, let's get it,
And again, I think for me, I'm sure all the actors in there have been in some kind of TV or film before. For me personally, the policeman, the main policeman who was always
Yeah,
eating
yeah,
con. Besides him, I had never seen anybody before ever,
yeah.
like in anywhere. And I'm sure, like I said, some of them may have been new, some of them may have done some work, but still, to work on a story like that. And again, I think the hats off to Karen because she really brought the most amazing performances, the lighting, even the post production. It just had this flow where I keep saying it, where you're so wrapped up into these characters that when the credits start rolling, you realize you're watching a film, and that to me is one of the most greatest things that you can do in creating a film.
Yeah, no, awesome. I mean, that was, yeah, I mean, that's a great compliment. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, that's really what you hope for, you hope that, you make a piece where people can really, I mean, for me, that's cinema, right? Where people can jump into and project themselves and experience what they're watching without being, conscious that, it's being doctored. You want to give them a live experience of this emotion, you know, in obviously, a space where, everything really is
Yeah,
doctored and set up, and you're trying to create pure emotion within that space.
yeah, that's awesome. What are you working on next? Anything you can talk about, doc or another narrative, or you're still in the deciding phase?
Yeah, I've been kind of 6 months in now on another film project. A
Great.
commercial kind of Hindi action movie. So yeah, it's really exciting. Really, really a completely different space now, just kind of raw, gritty action movie. But yeah, great fun, like sports day every day. So
That's
yeah.
super. That's super. I
Yeah,
mean, I think I would since you talked about environmentalist uh films and you being into that world, there's a doc that came out that got a lot of critical acclaim. My cinematographer shot it. It's called Plastic.
right,
If you find it, look it up. You'll like it.
right.
It's just about how we consume plastic and how dangerous it is, and for us and for the environment specifically. But you might enjoy it. Just thought I should let you know.
No, yeah, wicked. I'll check it out. Yeah, yeah.
Excited, excited. Awesome. Well, listen, Vikash, it's been amazing. Again, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think I've kind of covered most of it. There's not much to say for me. It's really like, okay, we were just, yeah, just trying to, yeah, just
I,
touch it gently and make this film happen. And it wasn't, there wasn't too much in terms of, camera gimmick work or any elaborate,
yeah,
shots to talk about or anything like that. It was just, simple work.
I will say one thing. I think you're a great storyteller. Not from a camera standpoint only, but just even talking to you in the last 35 minutes or so. You have a very unique ability to tell a story, and you should definitely consider directing something one day because, in terms of like a narrative, not doc, which I'm sure you have done. Um, it's very very rewarding and soothing and relaxing to hear you tell your story. I'm just being
Thank you very
upfront.
much.
So
No,
yeah.
no, wicked.
Um, and I wish you all the best. Hopefully we can chat whenever that next film is about to be released or is to be and when it was released is about that. That'd be really awesome if you're up for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much,
No.
man. And I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for reaching out and enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much for making the time.